Welcome into the Awesemo NASCAR strategy shows. We're here to get you ready for tomorrow's Hollywood Casino 400. We are sponsored by Prize Picks. Later on in the show, we'll give you some Prize Picks strategies, as Phil has already looked at some drivers to look out there in terms of their prop bets over there. Of course, as always, if you're not subscribed also right here on YouTube, be sure to do that. Hit that notification bell so you know a show is live here on the channel. Phil, we come in after last week's Texas race, and I guess you want to get a little steam off your shoulders here a little bit about how everything that wasn't supposed to happen at Texas, well, it did.
Yeah, if people know the Buddha man, and he's an infamous figure on Twitter. One of the smarter things that he's ever said is that what you expect to happen often doesn't. And that was the case in Texas. Dominator wise, we were expecting a 3-dominator race, and we ended up with a 2-dominator race. And in fact, it was so lopsided that Kyle Larson led 75% of the race. I mean, it's something that you might have expected like the first race or maybe the second race after the initial repave, when the grip would just be so fantastic for these drivers up front that nobody could pass. But 4 years into this, you would expect that these trends would continue. And of course, that didn't happen. The other thing that was very tilting, and it basically sealed a lot of people's lineups. I know it did for me. It was just constantly throughout the rest of the race, checking back to see, hopefully, if I could just get back to breaking even. That didn't happen. Was after the competition caution, so that everybody could check their tires and people didn't pit, because this is a low tire wear track, so you don't need these competition cautions. 2 laps after everybody goes back to the green flag, everybody's jumbled up together. And what happens? Bubba Wallace comes off the wall and he collects 6 other drivers with him. And that included the very chalky Ryan Newman and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. And if you paired those two together in your cash games, you were basically dead. I mean, I lost all of my double ups. I lost like probably 90% of my head-to-head games. And what made it even more infuriating is that Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin were basically no-shows. Like, those were the 2 guys after Larson that we were all expecting to contend for the win, if not just lead laps. And it was plain and simple that Hendrick showed up with speed that day, and something happened in the middle of the race where they were just non-contenders. Kyle got some damage somehow. Denny had his own issues, but I mean, it was basically everything that wasn't supposed to happen in that race happened. And of course, I spend 5 minutes telling everybody you can't play the punt plays because they don't move out of the 30s. And what do we have? David Starr, Garrett Smithley, all of these jokers that should not have finished where they did because of the attrition of the race and multiple guys, not finishing the race. They're able to move up. I think that the number that I saw was David Starr finished this race 11 laps down, but still finished in 23rd position after starting like 39th or 40th. It was bananas. This is not the race that we are expecting for tomorrow.
And of course, as we move ahead here to Kansas here for the Hollywood Casino 400, and we talk about roster construction. Of course, everyone can go over to awesemo.com. They can read your race preview for this one, and where you outline that this is a 2-dominator build. And so, in terms of GPP versus cash, what are you doing in terms of dominators versus place differential?
Right. Unlike last weekend's race, this isn't going to be 500 miles. This is only 400 miles. So we're back to 267 laps. So the need for dominators decreases. We're looking at, for cash games, I'm going to say you probably want to go with a dual dominator build, whether we're talking DraftKings or FanDuel. You just want to give yourself at least a couple of darts to throw out there. And of course, the guy that everybody's is gonna lock in cash games is going to be Kyle Larson. Now, what you do with that secondary dominator, it's a bit of a toss-up this week because there isn't just one clear candidate to get in there. As far as your tournaments, you can look at a third dominator. The majority of these races, going back to 2013 when we first started using the Gen 6 car, have had 3 dominator races. But once again, going back to what happened last week, I mean, there's nothing to stop you from going back to a single dominator build with Kyle Larson. And in fact, in tournaments, that really might kind of be the way to be, because I've combed over these numbers all week, looking at past Kansas numbers, as well as looking at the 550 horsepower package data. And I tweeted this morning, and it's still the way that I feel. If you have a strong lean on who the secondary or the driver to lead the third most laps in tomorrow's races, I mean, you've got a clearer picture of this race than I do, because I can make pros and cons for about 7 different drivers. Once you get past Kyle Larson, it is really tough. So perhaps if the decision making really is that tough, the best decision is don't sweat an expensive dominator. Just try to get some more guys in the 8K and the 9K range that you're kind of hoping get high finishes and allow you to have some dominator points in the process. But yeah, cash games, DraftKings, FanDuel, 2 dominators. That's probably going to be the route that you're going to want to go in tournaments, but you can go a single dominator all the way up to 3.
I will tell you, before we start getting into these drivers, I did some dummy crunches earlier going in the cruncher. And look, no surprise, the driver that was coming up the most, and we'll get into Kyle Larson here momentarily, but let me just see if you were surprised by number 2 and number 3, Stenhouse Jr. and Ryan Preece.
It totally makes sense, because if people are going to look at the top driver tool, one guy is soaking up more than half of the field in terms of top 2 dominator percentage, and then beyond that, it's there. So if the projections are pointing that way, and thus the fantasy cruncher lineup builder is going to go that way, well, shoot, let's just go with place differential, because that makes a whole lot more sense than trying to differentiate these dominators.
And of course, as we start off with our top tier drivers here, these drivers that are 10K and above over on DraftKings. Of course, Kyle Larson starting on the pole, Denny Hamlin starting 6th, Kyle Busch starting 4th, Mark Truex Jr. starting 7th, Chase Elliott starting 5th, Kyle Larson 11,700 on DraftKings, 14.5 over on FanDuel. Look, he's going to be popular. Everyone's going to be trying to jam him in the lineup. I guess let's talk both sides of this. Obviously, if you're in a 150 max, I guess the question that really becomes is, how much Larson do you want in a 150 max?
It really is just how much risk are you willing to take? Because in 20 max tomorrow on DraftKings, I'm going 100% Larson. Just locking them in and moving on. Now, that is something I'm not going to advise for in 150 max, unless you really just do have some extra money that you're willing to say, if this backfires, then I lose all of it, so be it. But I'm going to be very aggressive with that. And quite frankly, based on ownership projections and with people's recency bias guiding their lineup decisions this week, in order if Larson truly is the way that you want to get out over the field, which it's incredibly tough, you are going to have to lock into some crazy ownership numbers this week when it comes to Larson. Single entry, I don't think you can get away from him. 3 max, I don't think you can get away from him. When we get to 20 max, that's when you can probably say, all right, I can start looking at matching the field. But if the buy-in is low enough, like the happy hour, we're talking about $20, then you might just take the path that I'm doing and locking them in. But once we're getting to 150 max, that's where you're probably saying, I want to potentially cap myself at 60%. And you may say, okay, why do I want to go that low with a driver that has this much potential? And quite frankly, the only case that I can make against Larson is because of that win last week at Texas. He's locked into the championship. So we really don't know how much attention at Hendrick Motorsports, especially with his crew chief Cliff Daniels, has already been diverted to preparing that car for Phoenix. Yes, they've got a race this weekend, and yes, they've got to go to Martinsville. But just how much of R&D is already going into that Phoenix car, and is anything about this car this week getting getting diverted that would normally go into this Kansas car. And if they're not totally focused, then you could very well have Larson lead 30, 40 laps, finish with a top 10, and you're really going to be disappointed. So I think if you're going underweight on Larson, or you're not just totally locking in what's going to be the fastest car, the best driver in this package so far this season, you really are hoping that attention is on Phoenix and not on this weekend.
Of course, people can check out the race sheets that you have there. And of course, part of that is you talk about, the drivers that you want to be in that dominator pool. And of course, all the drivers that are up here are in that pool. I mean, as you look at Hamlin, Kyle, Truex, and Chase Elliott, who is the best potential person? Maybe if you want to pair with Kyle Larson and say, hey, that's my 2 dominator build.
It's really tough because Denny was in a position to win this race. If people will go back to the spring Kansas race, this is the infamous tire on pit road situation where Reddick comes down pit road, the tire gets away from him, and instead of NASCAR doing what they should have done, which was calling the yellow flag immediately, they let everybody cycle through their pits. And in fact, they wait because Chris Buescher, who was leading at the point, basically played chicken with NASCAR and said, I'm going to stay out here as long as possible to see if you finally get motivated to call this yellow flag, and it'll keep me out front and possibly have a chance to win this race. Buescher got to the point where he had to pit for gas. He comes down, gets his green flag pit, goes out there, and then NASCAR calls the yellow flag. Hamlin ends up taking the lead on that restart, and Hamlin, who always has these weird choking points at the end of races where he should win, but he'll find a way to just screw himself out of the win. Larson's a good 2 to 3 car lengths behind him, and Hamlin, with keeping his eyes on Larson behind him instead of in front of him, he hits the wall, and then it's just a couple of laps later that he cuts down a tire. And Hamlin has won this race before. He won it in the fall race of 2019, came back in the spring of 2020, won this event. Make the case for Kyle Busch, who once again racked up another top 10 finish. He didn't get the top 5 like we were hoping for last week, but got a top 10 finish. He won this race back in the spring. That was one of the final restarts. And Truex, he's probably the least likely of these 3 Joe Gibbs drivers to be a potential dominator, but he's typically showed up here pretty well and run better in the past. And for those of you making 150 lineups, you've always got to have these really weird kind of contingency lineups that, what if A and B happen? Well, here's your contingency lineup to consider. The rain for Kansas is going to start falling sometime tonight, and it's supposed to keep falling through the morning and potentially into the afternoon, when there's going to be around 3 o'clock, there's going to be a final squall line that's going to push its way through Kansas, dump a bunch of rain, and then it's going to stop raining. Well, if this postpones the race, until they can get the track dry and get it suitable for racing until the late afternoon and push it into the evening, because Kansas does have lights. Well, there are few better drivers that race at night than Martin Truex himself. So if that opens the door for this race to end under the lights, then Truex definitely has to be a driver that you consider in your driver pool. But outside of Larson, with these 3, I am going to rank them in the order that they are salary-wise: Hamlin, Busch, and Truex as far as potential dominators.
Of course, appreciate everyone that's in here on a Saturday afternoon watching the Awesemo NASCAR Strategy Show. Do want to let you know about a promo we got going on over at Awesemo.com as we are celebrating the start of the NBA season. You got to take advantage of the Curry promo we got going on, where you can get 50% off your first week of Also Plus Platinum for new members. This offer is valid through Monday, October the 25th. You can get a week of Also Plus Platinum for new members for only $15. Of course, you do got to use that promo code Curry. Of course, you get access to all the great tools and content we have over at Awesemo.com, ownership projections, and so much more. So you got to check out that promo we got going on over at Awesemo.com for new members. Get a 50% off your first week of Also Plus Platinum when you use the promo code hurry. Of course, you got to take advantage of that. Of course, you heard Phil talk about that top driver tool that we have on the NASCAR coverage to help you develop your lineups here for tomorrow's NASCAR race. Let's move on to tier number 2. This will be the drivers in the 9K and 8K range. So we got Alex Bowman starting 25th, William Byron starting 9th, Ryan Blaney 2nd, Brad Keselowski 3rd, Kevin Harvick 11th, Joey Logano 8th, Kurt Busch 13th, Tyler Reddick 12th, Ross Chastain 24th, and Christopher Bell 10th. I was looking at the race sheets, and one of the ones that in this tier that really stuck out to me based on track history here was Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, Harvick, you've got the victory back in the spring of 2018, and you've got top 5 finishes in both races last year. You've got the second place finish in the spring race. That's his best finish in this package year to date. But once again, I'm going to point people to the way that race ended under multiple yellow flags and restarts. That kind of allowed him to propel himself towards the front in that race. If the race just plays out, like if Reddick's tire doesn't go off of pit road and they can't go get it, then Harvick probably finishes that day in like 8th or 9th place. So he definitely benefited from what happened last week. But Harvick, he looked good last week at Texas. He and that was another thing that was not supposed to happen. Harvick matriculated his way through the field and ended up with I believe a top 5 finish last week. Now you're getting him at a much cheaper price point than he was last week. I'm not going to say that he's safe for cash starting 11th, but I mean, he is definitely within the realm of he fits the mold of a 2 dominator build plus a sort of expensive driver that can possibly get some dominator points, get you a top 5, top 3 finish starting 11th. Or if you're just going to go a single dominator build and then go with a bunch of guys that are in this 8K, 9K range to build around, Harvick makes sense on both of those ends in tournaments.
Of course, when you mentioned about place differential, we got to talk about Alex Bowman. He's starting 25th, but he is priced up here, $9,800 on DraftKings and $9,000 over on FanDuel.
Yeah, DraftKings, the FanDuel salary, I like that at 9K, but at 9,800 on DraftKings, they are definitely making you pay for this place differential. And the numbers for Bowman are pretty good. Over the last 7 races here at Kansas, his average finish is within the top 10. It is at 9.9. So I mean, it's just right there. But basically, Bowman is Harvick from last week with probably a faster car at a $1,000 discount. If you're just going to go a single dominator in cash or tournaments, then Bowman almost has to be the second driver in because of this place differential floor. With he's got top 5 finishes here before, but his most likely outcome is going to be a top 10 finish. And if there isn't really a notable secondary dominator, like people are going to play Byron, people are going to play Blaney. But with Bowman's place differential potential there, I mean, he could easily outscore both of those guys and just really be the difference in cash in cash. He's kind of like a no-brainer if you're just on a single dominator build. But in tournaments, he could definitely outscore both of these guys, especially if Byron and Blaney really don't do more than, let's say, lead maybe 15 to 20 laps apiece.
Now, you could go down $1,700 in salary on DraftKings and get the guy that's starting in front of Bowman. That's Ross Chastain.
Yeah, wrote up Ross Chastain for Gas and Go that'll publish later. Believe me, it's been a ride with Chastain, and this was something that we cautioned against last week. The tracks that Larson struggled at while he was driving this car, we have to expect Chastain to necessarily struggle at, because, I mean, quite frankly, when you compare the driving ability of Chastain versus Larson, I mean, it's Larson heads and shoulders above Chastain. But these tracks that Larson had done well at in the past, we have seen Chastain and this 42 crew put, somewhat, I want to say similar, but you're getting probably 75% of the results. Larson in his history here at Kansas, he would lead laps, he would give you top five finishes. I mean, he was really good here. And in Chastain's first start for Chip Ganassi, he started 24th and ended his day in 14th. If you're looking at the rest of Chastain's numbers in the race sheets, be cognizant that was when he was driving the 15 for Premium Motorsports. So that's why these numbers were pretty bad, to say the least. But you put him in better equipment, he gets you a top 15 finish. That's what I'm expecting to happen this week. Makes sense in cash or tournaments.
And you look at the drivers who are starting at the top of the field here. We've got Ryan Blaney starting second, Brad Keselowski starting third. And I know when people look at the Dominator core to put together, you did mention about Brad as a Dominator.
Yeah, Brad finished really well last week at Texas. You got let me look at that again. Yeah, you got a fourth place finish out of him. And I mean, Brad's doing exactly what he needs to do. He's probably not going to be a threat to win, but he's giving himself a shot via points to try to move himself up and then hopefully put together a good show at Martinsville. Because, this is something that we have to consider, is that if Larson goes out and does what he's definitely capable of, and that's win this race again, then two drivers are probably going to make the playoffs based on points. And I don't think that's happened in a while. Generally, it's been an individual driver wins these three races in the third round and they all advance. And then we have a fourth driver that makes it on points. Well, Larson could win tomorrow and then make this two spots that come in via points. And Brad's putting himself in that position. You look here at previous finishes, you've got 4 top 5s, 5 top 10s. Dominator points aren't fantastic, but at a $9,100 price tag, it's once again, what do I exactly need from Brad to be a value? And it's really not that much. In fact, I think Brad is running so strong right now, and with this salary, if you wanted to go with Brad as your second Dominator in cash, I mean, I think you can totally get behind that.
What about William Byron starting 9th?
Byron is going to be super popular. Byron led 55 laps last week, I believe, in total green flag speed rankings at Texas. I believe he had the third fastest car. And quite frankly, Byron probably could have won that race if Larson's car just was not so good. One of the things you can always bank on with Larson is that even if he doesn't start the race good, Cliff Daniels is so good right now at making in-race adjustments that he'll make that car the fastest car, and Larson will go out and lead the rest of the event. Byron just has to get out in front of Larson, and I mean that I think with the speed that he's shown, that's something he's definitely capable of. The last 4 visits to Kansas for Byron, he's gotten you 4 top 10 finishes. Once again, he's run so strong this year in this package. He had a couple of hiccups, but I mean, that's water under the bridge right now, considering how he ran last week. I think that I don't want to play him in cash. I'd rather look to one of these playoff drivers, but he definitely makes sense as a Dominator option tomorrow.
Of course, one of the things I do want to mention is that today's free premium data and tools over at Awesemo.com are Week 7 NFL player rankings, the NBA Boom Bust tool, plus NHL ownership projections. So you got to check out that. Of course, one of the drivers in this tier is Tyler Reddick, and we want to talk about him, about our sponsor, Prize Picks. Of course, they've got their prop contest over there. And of course, we want to play NASCAR over there. Looking at the fantasy score, and I know Tyler Reddick was one of 2 drivers that really stuck out to you based on what the prop is over there at Prize Picks.
Yeah, currently Reddick's number is, you're going to have to choose over or under 31 points. Now, what's that equate to? It's basically, is he going to get you a 10th place finish or better if you're going with the over? Well, Reddick's done that twice in 4 starts here at Kansas, and if you look at what he's done in this 550 horsepower package, that is 5 straight races that he's finished 9th or better. So I think that he's going to continue that streak. Kansas really suits him. It's a big, wide track. You can get up against the wall. If people know anything about Reddick's driving style, he likes to get up right against that wall, find the speed that's up there. And if this track stays cool like it is right now because of the cloud cover and because of the rain, then there should be necessarily grip up there for him to find. And if he hovers around the top all day, for DFS purposes, he's probably going to give you some extra Dominator points via fastest laps. But as per Price Picks, I do think that you're going to get another top 10 finish out of him. So on one of my two picks that I've made, we're definitely going with Reddick over 31.
And I know the other one that stuck out to you is Erik Amarilla. His number is set at 27.5.
Yeah. This is purely one of these mispricing anomalies that sites get guilty of. They don't stay up to date with trends. I guess you would say. And in this case, they're giving Almirola 27.5. Well, he's going to need a 13th place finish or better. And in these 8 races at the intermediate tracks this season, Almirola hasn't done that once. It was a number that we jumped on last Sunday, and I think it's a number that you jump on again. Go the under on Almirola's number.
Of course, when you sign up over at Prize Picks, be sure to use that promo code Awesemo as they'll match your first deposit up to $100. Once again, that is promo code Awesemo. And be sure to use our prop tools we have over at awesemo.com with our NBA, NFL to help you decide what you want to play over there at Prize Picks. Once again, use that promo code Awesemo as they'll match your first deposit of up to $100. We move on to the tier 3 drivers. That'd be the drivers in the 7K and 6K range. So we got Austin Dillon, Erik Amarilla, who we just talked about there, Bubba Wallace, Ryan Newman, Parker Klingerman, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Matty D, Chase Briscoe, Daniel Suarez, Chris Buescher, Michael McDowell, Eric Jones, and Cole Custer. Where do you want to start in terms of these drivers? Is there maybe one that really sticks out to you, but whether it's good or bad?
It's got to be Parker Kligerman. I wrote about him in Gas and Go, but just to set this stage for people, I've looked at the projected ownership of everybody that's in the punt range, that's starting in the 30s or below, and Kligerman is definitely soaking up the most ownership. I think people have a conflated view of Parker Kligerman, and they also have a conflated view of this 96 car. We've seen this 96 car, I believe, 7 times this year. It's only been in the super speedway races, I believe, just 2 of them, and then the rest were road races. And people have this idea that it's not a punt car, that it's kind of like mid-tier equipment, like it's actually better than it is. And then when Parker Kligerman generally drives, it's in the truck series. He drives in a mid-tier truck that he always starts in the 30s because of owner points, but then he's able to move his way into the top 10. So for people that do play truck series DFS, they probably have this warped view that Kligerman is going to jump in this car. He's going to start 40th. He's going to push his way into the top 20, pick up a bunch of place differential, and be a fantastic play. This is Joey Hand from a couple of weeks ago back at the Charlotte Roval. This is not a fast car. Just twice has this car in its 7 starts ranked better than 25th in green flag average speed. And those 2 events were at Talladega and Daytona, where anybody can knock down the top fast laps. It's just a matter of where you are in the draft. Everything else has been bottom 25. Now these finishes have been pretty, they've been all right for this vehicle, but remember, this is a product of starting road races and starting super speedway events where, if you can just survive attrition and maneuver your way through the field, you can get a good finish. So I think the best way to look at this car is go back to Daniel Suarez from last season when he drove this car full time. If you just isolate the intermediate races from last year, I believe it was only 1 time that this car ranked top 30 in green flag average speed. And that was at like the first Las Vegas race. So to say, this is a slow car. This is not going to beat the likes of Ryan Preece, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., it's not going to beat these lower mid-tier cars. This is a car that is basically Rick Ware or Carl Long equipment. Parker's probably a really good driver, but in this equipment, he's going to be so hamstrung. Parker's probably going to start 40th, finish around 28th to 29th, assuming that this race doesn't have the attrition from last week, as it shouldn't. And in that case, he's going to score 24, 25 points, maybe 28 points on a good day. And at this salary on DraftKings at 7,100, I mean, you're still nowhere close to hitting 5x value if that's what you're wanting. So don't fall for this. Don't fall for this trap. People have been, falling over backwards to play good drivers and bad equipment all year, thinking that eventually it's going to mesh together and you're going to get a really good result. Here at Kansas, horsepower is going to, and equipment are going to matter so much, and it's going to be such a disadvantage for Kligerman. Here on DraftKings, he's unplayable.
One of the drivers that's been mentioned in the chat, they would like to know your thoughts on that's in this tier. That's Daniel Suarez. He's starting 16th, 6,400 over on DraftKings, 7,000 on FanDuel.
I think Suarez is pretty capable of doing what he did last week. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't have the same place differential that he did last week. So he, at starting 16th, he is solely a GPP play. But at this salary, he's going to give you a pivot off of Chase Briscoe, a pivot off of Matty D, who is relatively underpriced this week, and he's definitely going to be a pivot off the much chalkier Chris Buescher. With these guys in this range, and that includes Eric Jones, Michael McDowell, Cole Custer, you're really just hoping that they hold position, stay on the lead lap, and get you a top 15 finish. And Suarez, is definitely capable of doing that. And something to keep in mind, of course, this is a Richard Childress affiliated car. We have pretty good expectations for Reddick and potentially top 10 expectations for Austin Dillon. If we have those for those two vehicles, then it makes sense that Suarez should have top 15 expectations for us too.
Two drivers that we expect to be popular that are in this salary range will be Chris Buescher and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Who's the better play?
It's Stenhouse. Unfortunately, though, he's $700 more. If you're afraid of playing Ricky Stenhouse, and this goes also the same thing with Ryan Newman, literally, whatever reasons you had come up with last week to play these two, they still exist this week. These two were just, unfortunate. They were unfortunately on the bad end of variance when it came to being on the track at the wrong place when Bubba Wallace came off the wall and collected them. So the reason that we played them last week, because of track history, how they've run in this package, place differential, they exist, pretty much the same this week. You're getting you're paying a little bit more for Newman, and quite frankly, Newman's not quite as good at Kansas as he's been at Texas. But Stenhouse is practically the same driver. Now, if you're talking about tournaments, I think the option that I would look at would be Chris Buescher. I think that he potentially has a little bit of a higher floor than Stenhouse this week, finishing position wise.
A guy that probably not a lot of people are going to be targeting. That's Michael McDowell, starting 18th, 6,200 over on DraftKings.
Yeah, last week when we were talking about McDowell, it was at a cheaper salary point, but the question was, can McDowell hold position? Well, he had the things happen in the race that he needed in order for that to happen. Well, what are we talking about? Well, you get that wreck, and the guys that he should have been fighting with for the position that he's in, namely Stenhouse and Newman, they're removed from the equation. And yes, he went a couple of laps down, but he basically finished where he needed to finish, and became a value. Here, you're paying a little bit more because of that 17th place finish. Plus, you've got 3 straight top 20 finishes for McDowell. I'm going to say if this is a clean race, then McDowell's probably going to finish 20th, 21st, and you're not going to be that excited with him. In tournaments, I think like in tournaments, he's a 150 play when you're just trying to get some differentiation off of having so much Chris Buescher and potentially Eric Jones and Cole Custer. But there is, it is worth noting that the last 3 races here, all sorts of different circumstances, that he has been able to put good finishes together.
Of course, we'll have over right here on YouTube. We got 2 new YouTube channels for you when it comes to fantasy football and sports betting. I mean, look, we're all trying to decide who we want to start, who do we want to sit tomorrow. You got to check out all the great fantasy football coverage we have over here on YouTube. So be sure to check out that. Also, all the sports betting content we have as well. So you want to check out that, check out those YouTube channels. Now it is time to get down to tier number 4, which we effectively have called How Low Can We Go? Already mentioned about Ryan Preece. He's in this one at 5,700. So this group, we have Justin Haley, Anthony Alfredo, Corey LaJoie, Joey Gase, David Starr, Chad Fincham, Cody Ware, Ryan Ellis, Josh Bilicki, Quinn Hoff, and BJ McLeod. So how low can we go, Phil? What's the lowest driver we really, or I guess I should probably say, who do we need Xing out, not in the player pool?
But I'm going to take the same stand that I did last week. Gase, X out. David Starr, X out. Fincham, Cody Ware, Ryan Ellis, Josh Bilicki, Quinn Hoff, BJ McLeod. Just we're going to take the stance that this race does not resemble last week's race, and that these guys are not going to be a value, and they're not going to be the guys that you want. And this needs to be stated. Yes, these punt plays made their ways into the 20, but if you look at last week's optimal lineup, these guys weren't in it. So just because they were, ending their day with upper 20s, lower 30s, it still didn't mean that you needed them in the optimal lineup. They weren't there. So even in a good day where everything breaks right for these guys, it still didn't mean that you absolutely needed them. And of course, that was a product of DraftKings deciding that Kyle Larson only needed to be 10,500. But regardless, we're taking the stance that these guys are going to be finishing in the 30s. Once again, if I already made that case last week based off of how they've run in this package. But if you just look at these punt plays and what they've done at Kansas over the last 7 starts, I can find 3 drivers that have found their way into the top 30. 3 different instances, but everybody else is still finishing in the 30s, and that's what I'm expecting once again from these drivers. So in tournaments, the lowest that I want to go is Corey LaJoie starting 23rd, but even that it's super thin. That quite frankly, DraftKings should have thrown him down into the like the high 4K range to make this more of a potential possibility about rostering him. But LaJoie just he feels destined to, like, he's gonna fall back a couple of positions. Alfredo, once again, it's thin. You're hoping maybe for a 23rd or a 24th place finish. And Ryan Preece, this is the play. Like, if you're looking for a real way to get differentiation in your lineups, X this dude out. His ownership is out of all these guys in this range, his ownership is, I mean, it's heads and tails above everybody else here. Like, I don't know another way without giving away the secret formula to tell people that Preece's ownership, it does not match what his results have been in this package or what he's done at this track. Preece's last 3 finishes at this track have gone 32nd, 29th, and 34th. You're talking about this package alone. His last 5 his last 6 finishes have all been 25th or worse. At this projected ownership, this is a driver that, like, you can maybe have single digits in as if you're doing 150 max, but if you're doing 20 max, this might very well be a driver that you X out, hoping that this is the reason that you get differentiation, because people have a driver scoring single digits clogging up a bunch of their lineups.
Yeah, and I mentioned when I was doing my dummy crunches earlier today, Ryan Preece was the third most, the driver that's coming third most. He was plus 60% of my crunches. So yeah, obviously a great point you bring up. If you want to differentiate yourself from the field and you're looking at these punt plays, looking at someone not named Ryan Preece, really is the way to go. Of course, if you do have any questions, you can line those up in our YouTube chat right now. Of course, as always, appreciate you tuning in, and be sure to give us a thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Of course, you're not subscribed also right here on YouTube. Be sure to do that. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. Of course, come up here at the top of the hour. We'll have NBA Deeper Dive to get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. Mention a question about Erik Jones or Cole Custer. So I guess basically saying who's the better play there.
Okay, Erik, just break these guys down individually. Erik got a 12th place finish last week. He ended up in the optimal lineup. But remember, what made it possible for Erik to ascend to the top 15, finish with a top 12? Well, it was everything else that we've talked about that happened in this race. There was wrecks, there was damage, and he just happened to keep a clean car and move his way up there. I think that if you're playing Jones, you're basically you're playing him with that same expectation that there's going to be a little attrition. He's going to stay on the lead lap, and that he's going to be able to move his way forward. You know, I don't want to bet on that, and definitely not in cash games and in tournaments. I don't know if I'm too wild about that. His track history is great, but remember that was in Joe Gibbs equipment, and in his first start here for Richard Petty, it was a 25th place finish. If you have a bunch of Erik Jones and try to use him as your way to get out over the field, and he gives you another 25th place finish, you're going to be sunk in tournaments. I think just because of that place differential, I'm probably looking to Cole Custer. 3 of his last 4 races at intermediate tracks, he's got finishes of 21st or better, which, I mean, yeah, that's not good. But when you consider the much riskier Erik Jones, in his last 6 races, you've got the 12th last week, and then you go back a few races, there was the 16th, but then in those other 4 starts, finishes of 24th or worse. I think that Custer is probably the little more stable of the two. And yes, he finished 24th at this race in the spring, but before that, in last year, both of last year's races, he had finishes of 7th and 14th. So we know that he's capable of getting you a top 15 finish. You're just hoping that he's able to pull it together.
I mentioned a question that just came in from one of our subscribers saying, you mentioned you're not a fan of Preece. Can you name a good pivot in that price range on DraftKings for a single entry GPP?
Oh, this is the really tough thing, because I'm not that excited about anybody down here. Like I said, Alfredo, you're hoping maybe for a 23rd or a 24th place finish. LaJoie's best result maybe that he's able to hold on to position all day and maybe push for a top 20 like he was able to do last week. But once again, you know, when the field wrecks out, you're able to survive it. You push yourself forward. I really do. The more and more I think about this week is really kind of laying itself out to avoid going too top heavy. Like you're gonna play one guy probably from above this 10K range, and then you're going to add a couple of guys in this 9K and 8K range, and you're really going to try to do your best to avoid going going below Cole Custer, because it feels very thin getting below Cole.
Next question we got is in relation to Bubba Wallace. Of course, Bubba starting 27th, 7,400 on DraftKings, 6,200 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Bubba, the dirty name on everyone's lips, thanks to last week. Quite frankly, Bubba probably would have finished with another top 20 finish had he not initiated the wreck, but he finished 32nd. I think we go back to Bubba. I think Bubba is probably going to get you another top 16 finish. Joe Gibbs has ran really well here at Kansas in the past, so we're expecting that to follow its way down to Bubba. Starting 27th, if he's going to give you a top 15 finish, then I think he's really going to pay off in cash games. And I do also like him in tournaments. Comparing Bubba to Newman, I would much rather have Bubba this week than Newman.
We got a question about, will Alex Bowman be optimal? I'll kind of rephrase it. What's the path to him being optimal?
His path to being optimal is that Hamlin, Busch, Truex, and Chase don't end up leading the second most laps, and that Bowman also ends up with a top 5 finish. Now, I don't know what his odds are currently for a top 5 finish. So if people want to go, run to their local sports book and check those numbers, that might be worth investigating. But I think that's how Bowman ends up optimal, is that all of the more expensive guys in front of him, that they might end up leading 10, 15, 20 laps, but they don't lead so much that they become a part of the of the intrinsic process of having them in your lineups.
Of course, you want to check out all the coverage we have over at Awesemo.com. Be sure to take advantage of the Curry promo we got going on. You want to be able, so you can see those ownership projections, the projections from Alex Baker, also ownership, top driver tool, and so much more. So, Phil, any last words you have for our listeners as we wrap things up here?
Not just be sure to check out Gas and Go, help you out with some view options in cash games, in tournaments, and some potential dominators that I like.
And that is going to do it for this edition of the Awesemo Strategy Show. Appreciate everyone tuning in here. We'll be back next Saturday as we'll get you ready for next weekend's race. So good luck to everyone this weekend. We will talk to you next week on the Awesemo NASCAR Strategy Show. Have a good day, everybody.